Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think that one of the things that I've done over the last 50 years is I'm a farmer and I raise cattle. And when we're raising cattle, I raise a lot of bulls. And after listening to all this stuff, my old BS meter's going ding, 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 ding. Because what we're seeing here is a myth about climate change, about a climate crisis. We aren't having a climate crisis, but what we are having is we're having a crisis of common sense. We went down to the Prairie State campus here last year, talked to the CEO down there. One of the questions we asked him is, why are you guys worried about capturing CO2? And he looked at me and he shrugged his shoulders and he said, I have no idea why we're capturing CO2. They just decided it was the evil element in our atmosphere. And so I think that's one of the questions that nobody's been able to answer is, why are we capturing CO2? And one of the reasons why I ask that is CO2 makes up 4/100ths of 1% of the global atmosphere. Doesn't amount to nothing. And as far as human beings concerned, we're about 3% of that 4/100ths of 1%. So in my little cowboy brain, that tells me that it doesn't amount to anything, and we're creating this whole event about climate crisis, about climate change, and another thing that I would like to ask is, if you're going to reduce 4/100ths of 1% of CO2 in the atmosphere, what's your goal? What do you want to do? We need CO2 to grow green things. And if you keep reducing that, guess what? We aren't going to grow. We aren't going to grow green things. I know earlier this week I planted 15 million carbon capturing plants to cycle CO2. You want to talk about science. You want to talk about the science. It's that if you participate in sound science, your observation dictates your conclusion. Now think about that for a minute. In sound science, your observation dictates your conclusion. We have a lot of research and a lot of data that we've collected on this issue over the past 70 years. And we've gone from the freeze out to acid rain to global warming to climate change. And there's one thing that I know is there's been 41 climate disasters predicted since 1967. And guess what the win-loss record for that is? It's 0 disasters and 41 right now. There's been 0 disasters out of everything that had been predicted. In 1982, Al Gore said that, because of CO2, the ice caps are going to melt and we're going to lose 25% of Florida. If sound science dictates your conclusion, I would conclude that 25% of Florida is still there and people continue to build on the coast. I understand that it's hard for people to get their mind wrapped around this scam that's been perpetuated on Illinois and on our nation. It's much easier to fool people than to convince people that they've been fooled. And I don't expect I'm probably going to change anybody's mind today, and you aren't going to change my mind, because in sound science, your observation dictates your conclusion. We are not having a climate crisis, but what we are having is a crisis of common sense. And what we're doing here is we won't prevent a crisis, but we will cause a crisis by making energy completely unreliable and unaffordable for the American industry and the American people. We had CEJA that we did here not very long ago, the Clean Energy Jobs Act. And one of the things that I've always been told was that was going to create jobs. We have a 3,000-acre solar panel farm in my neck of the woods. And we're always talking about creating good union jobs. We're always talking about creating jobs for the black and brown community. And I know that I visited that solar farm on several occasions. And the only black and brown people that were working there were from Texas and Mexico. And so I think it's important you remember that. They make all these promises and there's no following through on any of it. Another thing that we did was we called the IBAW and asked them why they weren't over there picketing on that job. And they had no answer, but there was no IBEW trucks there was no union jobs, there was no nothing. So these are all shallow and misguided things. There's one thing that I know is that they're talking about injecting this CO2 into a mile plus under the earth. You know, in other words, they're going to give the earth an enema. And so in all enemas, there's always an explosion afterwards, and guess what? It's just a matter of time that all this blows up. Thank you, Madam Speaker.